Good morning. A whirlwind week for our new president. 18 executive actions, 3 TV interviews, 3 speeches, a joint news conference, a blizzard of activity and controversy. Over the wall and who will pay for it. Those unfounded allegations of voters' fraud. And then Friday, it got real with an executive order that had immediate and profound impact.
I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here.
No surprise for anyone following the election, Trump has been promising this extreme vetting for more than a year, but still it came as a shock. A 90-day ban on travelers from 7 countries: Syria, Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, and Libya. Even green card holders who thought they were free to come and go, caught in the chaos. All refugees also banned for 120 days. The result? Hundreds of people detained or turned away, many thousands in a state of high anxiety, like 29-year-old Syrian doctor Mohammed Mustafa, here legally since 2013. Saturday morning, his wife was returning to Dulles Airport, where she was immediately turned away and put back on a flight to the Middle East.
They told her while she was on the plane that her visa would be canceled. And she was terrified even when she was on the air. And then when she came down, and the officers started to talk to her in a rude way. It's this is not your visa, this is America's visa. And we will take it away from you.
With stories like that spreading like wildfire on social media, protesters descended on airports around the nation. New York, Chicago, San Francisco. In the Oval Office Saturday, after a round of phone calls to foreign leaders, Trump defended his action.
It's not a Muslim ban, but we're totally prepared. It's working out very nicely. We're going to have a very, very strict ban, and we're going to have extreme vetting, which we should have had in this country for many years.
So let's bring in our David Curley at Dulles International Airport. David, you heard the president say the government was totally prepared. Is that the impression you're getting out there?
The short answer this morning, Martha, is no. Sources are telling ABC News that the agency charged with carrying out these executive orders were not fully briefed. In fact, a lot of Homeland Security officers were basically making decisions on the fly yesterday as individuals were coming into the United States. There were families, protesters, a small army of immigration lawyers. It was quite the scene here at Dulles and airports around the country. In Seattle, police actually dispersed some crowds with pepper spray. It was a day of high drama at those airports. Cheers broke out at JFK Airport when a federal judge in Brooklyn ordered a nationwide order protecting anyone on a plane coming into the country at an airport from actually being immediately deported, kicked out of the country. And here in Virginia, another judge issued a 7-day ban on the government removing green card holders who have been detained here at Dulles International. And airlines were also kind of at a loss as to what exactly to do. The Airline Transportation Association, the International Association of Airlines, put out a statement, so airlines had to make decisions how they were going to handle the hundreds of people who were detained or told they could not come into the country. Martha?
Thanks, David. Let's take this to Terry Moran, who covers the Supreme Court for ABC. David mentioned those stays issued on this executive order. What does that mean?
Well, it's a timeout, Martha. Right now, the courts, 3 courts have said, 3 judges have said that the people who are appealing for relief from this executive order, people trying to get into this country who've been stopped, they've got a good enough case to take a close look at. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but the judges say if they don't take the case and they're turned around, they'll suffer irreparable harm. Now they take a hard look at the law, and the law, much of it is on President Trump's side. The Constitution, many laws of Congress, many precedents of the Supreme Court all give sweeping powers to any president to decide who does or doesn't get to come into our country. Now, Congress has passed a couple of laws saying you can't discriminate against people on the basis of national origin. But they've also passed a law saying anytime a president determines that a group of people is detrimental to the interests of the United States, he or she, any president, can suspend their permission to let those people into the country. So the bottom line here is, while President Trump is testing the limits of presidential power, when the cases are close, the tie almost always goes to the president.
But Terry, no major terror attacks have been carried out on U.S. soil by people from any of those countries, those 7 countries. So why is that a national security risk?
Well, that's an argument, and it may be a very good political argument, a good argument to have with some of your guests today, but judges sit in courthouses, and they defer all the time. They let the president decide matters of national security. They say, we don't get the intelligence. We aren't talking to the generals. We don't have diplomats all over the world. And so you do, unless you've done something really outrageous, courts will generally let the president decide what is in the national security interest of the United States. Now, that said, President Trump is testing the waters here. One, he has a religious qualification there. He says that members of religious minorities in these countries will get special treatment. And he's gone on television and said that means Christians. Well, that's probably unconstitutional under the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. You can't choose on the basis of what religion a person is, how you're going to enforce the law against them. And then many people who have already established lawful, permanent residence in the United States, the United States government has given them the permission to stay, to be in this country. They may get caught up in this law, and the courts may not like this executive order stripping those people who are already lawful permanent residents of the United States of their rights.
Thanks very much, Terry. So let's turn straight to White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Good morning, Sean. I know there are many people who support this, but you heard those strong reactions, those stories of people stranded at airports, detained, Jesuit priests, veterans calling this un-American.
Well, let's look at the facts of what happened. There's 325,000 people from foreign countries that traveled into the United States yesterday. There were 109 people that this actually addressed that had come in post-entry from 7 countries that we've identified. That, in fact, actually the Obama administration had previously identified needed further travel restrictions. We've gone in, as Terry pointed out, it's a 90-day ban to ensure that we have further vetting restrictions so that we know who's coming to this country. The safety of the American citizens, the safety of our country, has got to be paramount. And that's what the president did yesterday, is to ensure that the people that we're letting into our country are coming here with peaceful purposes and not to do us harm. So this really comes down to 109 people who are all being processed through the system to make sure that when they've gone out of the country, gone somewhere that is one of those 7 countries, and coming back, that they've done so and not tried to go there and do anything that would cause our nation harm.
109 people, probably Muslims. What message does this send to Muslims worldwide?
What it sends is that we're going to protect our country and our people. There are 46 other countries with Muslim populations that are not part of this. And I think that's an important thing to note. So whether you're talking about Algeria, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, or the UAE, there's 46 Muslim-majority countries that are not in the 7. These 7 countries were identified by the Obama administration needing further travel.
But what about the countries like Pakistan, like Afghanistan, where there have been terrorist attacks,
we're going
Saudi
to
Arabia
we're looking
on 9/11.
at this. We're looking at all of this holistically. But I think the first step
But
was
why
to look,
these first, where there haven't been
I just said
attacks?
it twice, because I think these were the Obama administration put these first and foremost and said that these countries need to have further travel restrictions based on the intelligence that we have. So, you know, those were identified by the previous administration. There were further travel restrictions already in place from those 7 countries. What the president did was take the first step through this executive order of ensuring that we're looking at the entire system of who's coming in, refugees that are coming in, people who are coming in from places that have a history or that our intelligence suggests that we need to have further extreme vetting for.
Let's talk about Iraq. You saw that an Iraqi interpreter for America was detained temporarily. I have been in Iraq with those interpreters. They have saved lives of American soldiers, and now you're saying you can't come in.
No, that's not what we're saying, Martha, not at all. We're going to say we're going to make sure that we don't let someone slip through the cracks who seeks to do our country harm. That's it. The person was processed in. I know that in some cases there's going to be a bit of an inconvenience, but the inconvenience
is there any humiliation?
No, there's 109 people that were slowed down, over 325,000 foreign visitors that came in. But what do we say to the family that loses somebody of a terrorist, to whether it's Atlanta or San Bernardino or the Boston bomber? Those people, each of whom had gone out to a country and then come back. Now, granted, they're not on the country.
None of those are countries
But the point is,
list.
we took the first step in ensuring that a terrorist attack won't continue to occur on this country. And so what do we say to the family or to the individual who gets hurt, or the family of someone who gets killed because we didn't take these steps? Protecting this nation and our people is the #1 priority of this president and our government.
And you want to protect them against ISIS right now.
We want to protect them against everything.
Americans are fighting side by side with the Iraqis. Have you had any reaction or any indication that the Iraqis will now say, Americans can't come in here either?
No, look, we are working through all the diplomatic channels necessary to make sure that our friends and our allies around the globe understand that our position is to protect our borders and to make sure. And again, this is about slowing the process down. Those 109 people are being processed through the system to make sure that the vetting is applied, that they didn't do anything nefarious when they were overseas. And I think that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't let people just re-enter the country who are not citizens of the United States because they've gone to a place that we have concerns about. They should be asked certain questions. They should go through extreme vetting to make sure that when they re-enter this country, that they continue to do so with peaceful purposes.
How much of a heads up did you give Homeland Security? You've seen the scenes at these airports. You heard David Curley report
the people that needed to know knew. What we couldn't do was telegraph our position ahead of time to ensure that people flooded in before that happened, before it went into place. So the appropriate leadership was notified, and cables were being sent out through the State Department as we speak. The issue was, I know that when you get down to the TSA level and some of the Customs and Border officials who are on the front lines, we had to do it in a way that ensured the safety of America was preserved. And if we had telegraphed that ahead of time, then that would have been a massive security problem. So what we did was made sure that we were coordinating with the appropriate leadership at the appropriate levels through the departments and agencies, both Homeland Security, Border and Customs Protection.
Okay. The executive order also stipulates that after the refugee program is reinstated in 120 days, the government will prioritize religious minorities persecuted in their country. How will you determine what religion people are? How do you vet them?
During this 120-day period, we're going to put a system in place that looks country by country, group by group, and make sure that we put appropriate vetting in place. Again,
a religious test?
Hold on. No, what we're going to do is to make sure that people who have been persecuted for either religious or other reasons have an opportunity to apply and go through a vetting system that ensures that they're coming to this country to seek asylum, to seek a new life for themselves or their family, but to do so with peaceful purposes.
Okay, President Trump said during an interview on the Christian Broadcasting Network that persecuted Christian refugees should be seen as a priority.
Well, in some countries, they should.
Why are Christian refugees more worthy? Let me finish. Yeah. Why are Christian refugees more worthy of admission to the United States than Muslims or even Jewish refugees?
Well, it's a question of making sure that in some of these countries, they are the persecuted group. And so it's a fact that when they live in a majority country of another religion, they are a minority being persecuted, not able to practice their religion, in some cases under threat. And so it's just a fact that they are being persecuted in some of these countries, and we need to make sure that we recognize them so that they can come to this country and be able to practice their religion in accordance with our laws and our Constitution.
If you feel the threat is so great from these countries and so great from these refugees, why just 90 days? Why just 120 days? Can you really get this done?
I think we can, and that's the point, is to make sure that we put the safety of our nation first and foremost, and that we put a plan together during that period to put those extreme vetting measures in place. Look, this is nothing new. President Trump talked about this throughout the campaign and the transition, and he's doing exactly what he told the American people he was going to do. It's interesting. The criticism that's coming is from someone who's gotten into office, hit the ground running, had a flurry of activity to do exactly what he said he was going to do, whether it was bringing back jobs, fighting for American taxpayers and cutting the cost and waste out of government programs, or doing what he said overseas and protecting this nation. But he is not going to apologize for putting the safety of this country first and foremost.
I want to turn to Yemen.
Yeah.
President Trump, as president, as commander-in-chief, suffered the first loss of an American service member in Yemen today in a raid on al-Qaeda operatives, and 3 service members were injured in that raid. Another when we lost an aircraft in a hard landing. What can you tell us about that raid, and who did they get?
They got 14 individuals. They killed 14 individuals and captured a whole host of information about future plots that's going to benefit this country and keep us safe. We mourn for the loss of life of the service member who so bravely fought for this country and was killed. And then obviously, as you mentioned, 3 others were injured in the raid. Another one, when the aircraft went down, that aircraft was destroyed.
Shot?
That aircraft was destroyed in a hard landing, or it was
there was a hard landing and they destroyed it?
And we destroyed that plane to ensure that we didn't allow any of our technology out there. But
Will he go to Dover?
It continues to show.
Will he go to Dover?
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of this. Obviously, is developing right now when we speak. But the president was informed throughout the evening of the situation. He extends his condolences. But more importantly, he understands the fight that our servicemen and women conduct on a daily basis to keep this country safe. And that's why this order is so important. People are over throughout the world in some of these important regions like Yemen and countries rather, to ensure the safety of this country. And we need to take steps that if they're going to go out there and put their lives on the line every day to fight ISIS, to fight other people who are seeking to do us harm, to capture information that will protect future plots, that we do our part to make sure that we're not having an open door to allow people to march right into our country.
Let me turn
the
to
executive
Russia.
order, though, ties right into that, because we've got to do our part here to make sure that while they fight so gallantly overseas, that we're protecting the country and our borders.
I want to turn to the Russian sanctions. President Trump talked to Vladimir Putin yesterday about mutual cooperation in defeating ISIS and working together to achieve more peace throughout the world, including Syria.
Right.
Kellyanne Conway opened the door on Friday to removing sanctions against Russia. And the readout from the Kremlin said they underlined the importance of restoring mutually profitable trade and economic connections. Could President Trump agree to remove those sanctions without consequences
Yesterday
for Ukraine?
was the first call that they had. We're continuing to work with them to combat ISIS, especially in Syria, and deal with this crisis in Aleppo. There's an area in which we've got to work with them if we're going to defeat ISIS. And I think that's the first step. We have not made any decisions on sanctions. The president will continue to have conversations, and our team will continue to liaise with Russian officials. But no decisions were made. That really wasn't brought up on the call yesterday.
Republican John McCain said, for the sake of America's national security and that of our allies, President Trump should put an end to this speculation about lifting sanctions. Are you not willing to do that?
The president doesn't take anything off the table. He is a world-class negotiator. Part of the reason he's been so successful and part of the reason that he was elected president is because people understand that not only was he a successful businessman, but he's an amazing negotiator. And he doesn't come in telling people what he's going to take in or off the table to get the best deal possible for this country. He's going to work with Russia or any other country for that matter in areas of shared agreement. And if protecting this country, going back to what we've been talking about so far, he's going to work with them. If we can come up with a plan or partner with them in any way to defeat ISIS, then we're going to do it.
I want to turn to the National Security Council. The National Security Council executive order that has now been put in place removes the Director of National Intelligence, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from the NSC principals meetings. They are now only invited when, quote, issues pertaining to their responsibilities and expertise are to be discussed, but allowed instead in all of the meetings. White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, tweeting this morning, "This is stone cold crazy. After a week of crazy, who needs military advice or intel to make policy on ISIL, Syria, Afghanistan, DPRK?" Adding, Chairman of Joint Chiefs and DNI treated as afterthoughts in cabinet-level principals meetings. And where's the CIA? Cut out of everything. She also retweeted this: Trump loves and trusts the military so much he just kicked them out of the National Security Council and put in a Nazi in their place.
That's clearly inappropriate language from a former ambassador. Look,
Stone cold crazy?
The comments that she made, look, the reality is that General Flynn, former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, brought significant reforms to the NSC and to the Homeland Security Council, headed by Tom Bossert, who's an expert in all of this area. We are instilling reforms to make sure that we streamline the process for the president to make decisions on key, important intelligence matters. You've got a leader in General Flynn who understands the intelligence process and the reforms that are needed probably better than anybody else. else. And when you talk about the missteps that were made by the last administration, with all due respect, I think Ambassador Rice might want to wait and see how we handle this, because I think so far they've got an expert team of folks that have come in to understand the our intelligence systems and how we can modernize.
But streamlined without the chairman, without the DNI.
We've got an unbelievable group of folks that are part of the NSC that are making decisions to get that. The president gets plenty of information from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He continues to meet with them on a regular basis. He gets briefed by the Secretary of Defense. But what they have done is modernize the National Security Council so that it's less bureaucratic and more focused on providing the president with the intelligence he needs to make key decisions.
And Steve Bannon?
Steve Bannon.
What does he provide?
Well, he was a former naval officer. He's got a tremendous understanding of the world and the geopolitical landscape that we have now.
And so he's giving military advice in there?
No, it's not giving advice. Part of this is analysis. The data comes in, and how we synthesize that data to make the best decision for our country is something that's not just about intelligence. It's about the intelligence that comes in and the analysis that comes out of that. Having key decision makers and the chief strategist for the United States, for the president, to come in and talk about what the strategy is going forward is crucial. The data comes in raw, and what these key individuals do is help provide guidance for the president to make decisions. Having the chief strategist for the president in those meetings, who has a significant military background, to help guide what the president's final analysis is going to be is crucial.
Okay, thanks very much for joining
Martha.
us this morning, Sean. Good to see you. Now we turn.
I am not as nasty as racism, fraud, conflict of interest, homophobia, sexual assault, transphobia, white supremacy, misogyny.
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming. I know our first official press briefing is going to be on Monday, but I wanted to give you a few updates on the president's activities. But before I get to the news of the day, I think I'd like to discuss a little bit of the coverage of the past 24 hours. Yesterday, at a time when our nation and the world was watching the peaceful transition of power, and as the president said, the transition and the balance of power from Washington to the citizens of the United States, some members of the media were engaged in deliberately false reporting. For all the talk about the proper use of Twitter, two instances yesterday stand out. One was a particularly egregious example in which a reporter falsely tweeted out that the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. had been removed from the Oval Office. After it was pointed out that this was just plain wrong, the reporter casually reported and tweeted out and tried to claim that a Secret Service agent must have just been standing in front of it. This was irresponsible and reckless. Secondly, photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. This was the first time in our nation's history that floor coverings have been used to protect the grass in the mall. That had the effect of highlighting any areas where people were not standing, while in years past, the grass eliminated this visual. This was also the first time that fencing and magnetometers went as far back on the wall, preventing hundreds of thousands of people from being able to access the mall as quickly as they had in inaugurations past. Inaccurate numbers involving crowd size were also tweeted. No one had numbers because the National Park Service, which controls the National Mall, does not put any out. By the way, this applies to any attempts to try to count the number of protesters today in the same fashion. We do know a few things, so let's go through the facts. We know that from the platform where the president was sworn in to 4th Street holds about 250,000 people. From 4th Street to the media tent is about another 220,000. And from the media tent to the Washington Monument, another 250,000 people. All of this space was full when the president took the oath of office. We know that 420,000 people used the D.C. Metro public transit yesterday, which actually compares to 317,000 that used it for President Obama's last inaugural. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe. Even the New York Times printed a photograph showing that a misrepresentation of the crowd in the original tweet in their paper, which showed the full extent of the support, depth, and crowd and intensity that existed. These attempts to lessen the enthusiasm of the inauguration are shameful and wrong. The president was also at the Central, as you know, the president was at the Central Intelligence Agency today and greeted by a raucous overflow crowd of some 400-plus CIA employees. There were over 1,000 requests to attend, prompting the president to note that he'll have to come back to greet the rest. The employees were ecstatic that he's the new commander-in-chief, and he delivered them a powerful and important message. He told them he has their back, and they were grateful for that. They gave him a 5-minute standing ovation at the end in a display of their patriotism and their enthusiasm for his presidency. I'd also note that it's a shame that the CIA didn't have a CIA director to be with him today when he visited, because the Democrats have chosen, Senate Democrats are stalling the nomination of Mike Pompeo and playing politics with national security. That's what you guys should be writing and covering. That this, instead of sowing division about tweets and false narratives, the president is committed to unifying our country, and that was the focus of his inaugural address. This kind of dishonesty in the media, the challenging that bringing about our nation together, is making it more difficult. There's been a lot of talk in the media about the responsibility to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I'm here to tell you that it goes two ways. We're going to hold the press accountable as well. The American people deserve better, and as long as he serves as the messenger for this incredible movement, he will take his message directly to the American people, where his focus will always be. And with that, a few other updates from the day. The president had a constructive conversation with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada about strengthening the relationship between our two nations. They also discussed setting up additional meetings in the days to come, which we will follow up on. He also spoke to Prime Minister Peña Nieto of Mexico and talked about a visit on trade, immigration, and security that will occur on the 31st. The president will welcome his first foreign leader this Thursday, when the United Kingdom's Theresa May will come to Washington on Friday. On tomorrow, the president will oversee his assistants to the president being sworn in. He will then, the staff will then have an ethics briefing and be a briefing on the proper use and handling of classified information. Further updates as far as what he will do. Oh, and then in the evening, he will have a reception for law enforcement and first responders that helped support the inauguration. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I will see you on Monday.
Sean, Women's March.
How about you, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer in the briefing room with several statements, but not responding to any questions from reporters.